Chapter 20 of The Complete Golfer. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Complete Golfer by Harry Vardon. Links I have played on. Of all the golf courses that have any pretensions to be considered first class or even good second class, I can call to mind very few over which I have not yet played around. And at a time when the reputations of so many of them are being severely overhauled, and their merits and demerits criticized, some expression of my own opinions may prove interesting alike to the golfers who know them well, and to others who are looking forward with eagerness to the enjoyment of games upon them at future holiday times. Recent championships and big matches have resulted in such wonderful scores that some golfers are inclined to ask despairingly whether we have any really first-class course at all. And links which in the past have been considered perfect are spoken of contemptuously as fit only for handicap men who want their golf made easy. If they attach any importance to my opinion, then let them be assured that we still have many links which come near to being perfect, and that, notwithstanding the advent of the rubber-cord ball, there is no reason to complain about them or agitate for great alterations. We have them in England, Scotland, and Ireland, perhaps more in Scotland than elsewhere, but that is chiefly due to accidental circumstances. I am constantly asked, when the discussions to which I have referred are taking place, which, in my opinion, is the best course in the world. Many considerations enter into such a reckoning, but, after making it carefully, and with full knowledge of the fact that my answer is at variance with many of the best authorities on the game, I say Sandwich. Then let me tell you why I consider the links of the Royal St. George's Club to be the best that are to be found anywhere. There is, in the first place, not a single tee shot in the round where good play must not be shown by the golfer if he wants to achieve success. There is scarcely a hole at which a player who only half hits his ball from the tee does not find himself in grave difficulties, demanding an unusually brilliant recovery and sterling play until he has holed out, if he is to have a chance of getting on level terms with his opponent again, assuming that the latter is playing the proper game. The bunkers are so placed that a good shot has to be made every time to carry them. On the other hand, you are always satisfied that virtue is properly rewarded at Sandwich, and that if your tee shot is hit truly and well, you are certain to be nicely situated for your second. Elementary considerations as these may appear to be, there are many courses having the reputation of being first class where this reward is not always so sure as it is at Sandwich. The greens on that course are in all cases well protected, and they abound in character and variety. Some critics say that the carries over the first bunkers from the tees are too long, but I do not agree with them. Without being a particularly long driver, anybody who hits his ball truly can carry any bunker at Sandwich that ought to be carried from the tee. Then, at the championships in 1904, everybody was declaring, with much knowledge that had come after the event, that the course was on the short side, as was proved, they said, by the phenomenal scores that were made in the open competition. I do not agree. The scores made by 2 or 3 players were certainly low, but that was because they played exceptional golf. If I admit that the course is the merest trifle on the short side in going out, I hasten to add that a man must be playing perfect golf to get to the turn with a low score, while, unless his play does come within these narrow limits of perfection, he may find, grand player though he be, that he may easily run up a total for his 9 holes that would look foolishly large. Coming in, there is certainly no shortness about the holes, and there is plenty of scope for the man who wants to open out his shoulders with his driver and his brassy, while there are hazards everywhere for the punishment of the balls that are not kept in the fairway. These are the chief considerations which lead me to give an emphatic vote in favor of Sandwich when I am asked which is the best course. That is to say, the best test of golf. That is to be found in the British Isles, or elsewhere so far as I know, and I ask to be given no more favorable opportunity of studying a golfer's points than to see him play a round or two over the St. George's links. I should say that the third hole of Sandwich, although a short one, is in golfing quality one of the best of the 18, because it is so splendidly protected with bunkers and rushes everywhere, so that the golfer who would get onto the green from the tee does indeed need to be bold, and as accurate as he is bold. No faintness of heart, no doubtful stroke, will ever in the result be flattered by this third hole. The 6th, or maiden, famous everywhere, is very fine indeed, though it is not nearly so difficult as it used to be. The 8th is another beauty, well guarded by bunkers, a trifle on the short side if the wind is following, but a terror in length if the breeze is coming from the green. The 9th is good. The 10th calls for a perfect drive straight down the middle of the course, in default of which the second shot will abound with difficulty. And at the 15th, another very straight tee shot is wanted. If there is a breath of wind to help the ball from the tee, a plucky player may then come to the conclusion that he has a chance of reaching the green with his second, and a fine shot will take him over the treacherous little bunker that guards it, giving him a 4 of which he may be proud in the best company. These are the gems of Sandwich. Next to this course, I think that Prestwick with its Himalayas and its Alps is the finest that we have. It is an excellent test to apply to a would-be champion, although there have been complaints that this course also is short. Yet it is longer than it used to be, and it is merely the rubber-filled ball that makes it seem short. The 3rd hole at Prestwick is one that stirs the soul of the daredevil golfer, for, after he has dispatched the ball safely and well from the tee, he finds a big, gaping bunker, the famous Cardinal, ahead of him for his second, an ugly brute that gives a sickening feeling to the man who is off his game. Defy this bunker, be on the green with your brassy, put a 4 on your card, and you have done something which should make you happy for the morning. The 9th again is an excellent hole, at which the straight driver is rewarded all the way, and, if he does his duty, is given a 5. I have no hesitation in giving my judgment that the 17th is the finest hole to be found on any links. I say so because it is the best specimen of a really perfect 2-shot hole. If there is the slightest flaw in either the drive or the second stroke, all prospect of reaching the green in 2 vanishes into thin air. Mr. Laidley once lost a match and an amateur championship because his second shot here was not quite good enough. A good tee shot well into the middle of the course, a second that is as clean as a shot can be and as straight as a bullet from a gun, with the gods of golf smiling approval all the way, and particularly when your second is nearing the green. With all of these, you may ask for your putter for the 3rd stroke. But there is a bunker before the green, a bunker just beyond the green, and rushes to the right and left, so that the second shot has to indeed be a beauty for its maker to be wholly satisfied. This is the sort of hole that all good golfers best like to play, because they know that the good shots are certain of their reward, and that not merely the bad shots but the indifferent ones are met with just penalties every time. It is said that no 2 golf strokes are ever alike, but there is just enough similarity about them to prevent individual strokes from living very long in history, except in a few striking cases. Perhaps the most memorable shot ever played in golf was that made at this hole by the late Mr. Fred Tate, when he was engaging with Mr. John Ball, Jun., in the final tie of the Amateur Championship in 1899. The Scottish favourite was in the bunker guarding the green with his second, and it so happened that the bunker on this occasion was filled with rain-water, in which the ball was floating. Mr. Tate chipped the ball out beautifully onto the green, and saved a hole which seemed a certain loss. It is hard to find many holes that are worthy of being put in the same class as this. Man cannot make such holes. They are there when he seeks out the land for the first time with his golf clubs. Hoylake is a good course. There are 1 or 2 holes on it that must be admitted to be very tame. If the land in the middle of the course, which is at present out of bounds, were taken in and made playable, these holes could be much improved. The hazards are good and plentiful, and a satisfactory premium is put upon straight play. The 9th is a nice hole, a really good drive helping the player considerably. The 11th is another pretty one, neither long nor short, but just that length which a fine shot from the tee will reach, and accuracy is demanded by the rushes which seem all over the course as you stand to drive. I call St. Andrews a good course generally, but its bunkers are badly placed. They punish the man who is driving well more than the man who is driving badly, for they are generally the length of a good long drive. If this defect could be remedied, and if there were a few more bunkers at the sides to catch the pulled and sliced balls, then St. Andrews would be a fine links indeed. As it is, there are some excellent holes. The second is beautiful if the flag is put in the center of the green, because then a good second shot is rewarded as it ought to be. But it generally happens, when big matches are being played there, that the hole is placed in a corner, which frequently spoils the prospects of these good second shots. The 7th is good, calling for a most accurate second, and the 11th is the finest one-shot hole to be found anywhere. The green is on a plateau with bunkers all about it, and if you over-pitch it, your ball will be in the rushes beyond. Many golfers swear by the 17th, but I am not one of them. I declare that it is a very unfair hole, and there is no encouragement here to be plucky. The player must be pawky all the way, for it is fully 2-1 against there being anything but punishment as the result of bold tactics. The man who tries to place his long shot on the green may try again and again, and he will be convinced that it is next to impossible to stop there when he reaches it. For some reason, I like Muirfield, but it does not enjoy so many advantages as the other championship courses. There are not so many sandhills. It is on the flat side, and at the first glance you might take it to be an inland course, but after a single round you are greatly impressed by the good golf that is to be obtained upon it. The turf is capital, some of the hazards are very fine, and on the whole I think it may fairly be regarded as a very good championship test of golf. The 4th, 12th, and 18th holes all call for first-class seconds if the greens are to be reached. There are so many other good links in the north that a further selection becomes increasingly difficult. Troon, abounding in sandhills, is very fine, and the player needs to be very skillful to get round it in a low score. North Berwick is also good, and it is surprising to see how well the links are preserved considering the enormous amount of play to which they are subjected. There are many good holes at popular Carnoustie, with a fine length about them, which calls for good brassy play, and which is calculated to bring out all the good points that a golfer has in him. Cruden Bay and Darnock are enjoyable, but those who want to get the best golf in Scotland need not always go to those places that revel in reputation and where an inconvenient crowd may at most times be depended upon. Some of the gems of North Britain are hidden away in inaccessible corners, and the golfers who would reach them must take tedious journeys by land and sea, but he who is worthy of the game is in my opinion amply rewarded for these travelling labours, by the quality of the golf that is vouchsafed to him at his journey's end, and he is spared the annoyance of being obliged to book his starting time overnight, and of having a couple of hours to wait upon the tee if he is a minute late in the morning. I believe that Machrihanish is one of these very fine but out-of-the-way courses, but it happens to be one over which I have not hitherto played. I can tell of another where the most glorious golf is to be obtained, and which I strongly recommend to those on the lookout for a place at which to spend a golfing holiday. It is Islay. There the air is grand, and there is excellent accommodation to be obtained at the combined hotel and clubhouse, and as for the quality of the golf, I do not hesitate to say that the course is in every respect fit for the championships to be decided upon it. There is one hole there, the 3rd, which is the most difficult anyone can imagine. If I were asked to select one from all the thousands of holes that I have played in my time, I should pick this one out for the difficulty. They call it Mount Zion, and I think it is a good name for it. You must make 3 very good shots to reach the green, and in the matter of accuracy, the 3rd needs to be a gem if any satisfaction whatever is to be got out of the whole business. The green is on a plateau, and it is protected by every contrivance that ingenious nature has vouchsafed to the makers of courses. If you are short, you are in a running stream. If you pull, you go out of bounds. And if your ball trickles over the green, away it goes into the sea, tortures the most terrible for the erring ball. Yes, decidedly, I think this is the hardest hole I have ever seen. The first time I played it, I took 10 to hole out, and yet won it from a very professional player who was an ex-champion. I have never done a hole better in my life than when I once halved this with Taylor in 4 in the course of a match which Taylor won at the 24th hole. The 7th is also a very fine hole with a bunker in front of the tee, which is very similar to the maiden at Sandwich. An old golfer who lives there told me he can remember the time when it was a rabbit scrape. Like all golfers who know them, I sing the praises of Gullen, Kilspindie, and Loughness. There is a variety of good golf to be obtained in Ireland as well. Portrush, Portmarnock, Dollymount, Lahinch, and Newcastle, go down. All these are fine links. For a place to visit for an enjoyable golfing holiday, when health is a governing consideration also, I should select Portrush as one of the very best, while golfers who wish to play at Portmarnock and elect to put up in a Dublin hotel have an experience of pleasant variety which I at all events have found very agreeable, for you have first the train, then the car, and last of all the boat to take in order to reach the course, and not an inch of the journey is wearisome. Of course, this proceeding cannot be recommended to those golfers who prefer to sleep in close proximity to the first tee, regardless of all other pleasures that are to be obtained without any sacrifice of the game. The course I like best in Wales is that at Ashburnham. over which the Welsh Championship was last played for. It is one of those excellent natural links which require very little attention. The Royal St. David's course at Harlech is also very good. Coming back to England again, I agree with all others that splendid golf is to be obtained at Westward Ho, although there is one quite unique feature of this course of which some golfers, myself among the number, do not bear the pleasantest recollections. I refer, of course, to the rushes of a peculiar growth which are to be found there in such abundance. I can conceive no nightmare more horrible to a player than one in which during his hours of troubled sleep he is in the imagination vainly trying to rescue his unhappy ball from the clutches of these famous rushes. They stand full 5 feet high, strong and stiff like stout twigs, and they have sharp and dangerous points which seem as if they might be made of tempered steel. A kind of blossom appears on them in the season as if to disguise their evil features. Any player who is unlucky enough to put his ball into them, and there are 1 or 2 holes at which even a good shot may find its way there, must always encounter a considerable risk of breaking his club in the endeavor to play it out again. I believe that attempts have been made to grow these rushes elsewhere, but the seeds have been carried away from their native Westward Ho, have never prospered. Perhaps some golfers may reflect that this is just as well, though, with all their faults and dangers, I certainly do not condemn them as a hazard. They are a novelty, and all things that come from nature must be admitted without question into the game of golf. On the south coast there are several fine links. Newquay is excellent for a holiday, and a course of the St. Paul's Club at Deal, now that it is 18 holes, is very fine. I have not enjoyed recent acquaintance with it, but the short 4th hole, which they call the Sandy Parlour, struck me when I was last down there as being a very sporting little piece of golf. Both Littlestone and Rye are admirable, and I have pleasant memories of the latter, particularly in connection with a match I once played there with Mr. Fred Tate. Again, on the east coast of England, there are courses in number which afford the best opportunities for enjoyable and skillful golf. Cromer is a mixture of inland and seaside. It is one of those seaside courses which don't look what they are, but some parts of it are good, especially those which lie through the sand dunes. The lower part is tame. However, the air is beautiful, and the golfer who makes his headquarters at this place enjoys the material advantage of having 3 or 4 other first-class links within easy reach. For example, there is Brancaster, which, though a long distance from any railway station, is worth any amount of trouble that may be expended on the journey. The turf is excellent, the hazards well placed, and the golfer who does not keep straight is penalized as he ought to be. It is a fine course. Then there is Hunstanton, which is also very good, and Sheringham too. Higher up there is golf at Redcar and Seaton Carew, which none need despise. On the northwest coast there is more golf to be had that is well worthy of the name. St. Anne's and Formby are both capital, and the fine golf is necessary to get round these courses at all well. Wallasey is highly satisfactory. Both my space and my memory are unequal to giving a complete list of all the seaside courses that should be commended, and the absence of any particular one from my little list does not imply that I rank it as inferior, although I have tried to mention all those that I consider the very best. So far I have said nothing about inland links, because the golfer who is going away from his own for a brief period for pleasure and improvement usually elects to play at the seaside, and wisely so, for, apart from the superior hygienic properties of the atmosphere, there is no getting rid of the fact, however much we may be attached to some inland courses, that seaside golf, when it is the real thing, is entirely different from any other. It is better in every respect. In fact, it is usually ideal. It gives more benefit to the mind and body of the overworked player, and it pulls out his game and makes a golfer of him as nothing else can ever do, and it affords such variety of a true sporting character as nothing but nature can provide. But in thus extolling the seaside game, I do not wish for a moment to be considered as disparaging the golf that is to be had almost everywhere throughout the country in these days. Inland golf is a necessity to all except the leisured people who have no occupation which chains them to cities and towns, and there is now so much of it that it has taken a dominant place in the golfing world. And if the inland turf does not possess those glorious qualities that distinguish the seaside article, and if the bunkers constantly bear evidence of having been carted to the place where they are situated, and if, moreover, the evenness of many green fields becomes somewhat monotonous, nevertheless the golf which is to be obtained at many of these places is thoroughly enjoyable, and at the same time as severe a test of skill as the most conceited player could ever wish for. Take Sunningdale, for instance. This course, in my opinion, is the best of all the inland links with which I am familiar, and it requires the very finest golf to get round it in anything like a decent score. Unless the golfer plays with his head as well as with his club, he will find himself in difficulties all the way. Walton Heath is another good example. Here also a capital player must be on the top of his game to get round in anything like bogey. Those who made this course have mastered the undesirable eccentricities of the rubber cord ball, as few others have done. This ball is too apt to despise the average inland bunker, particularly in the summertime, and goes skipping over it as if there were no obstruction in sight. But it does not do that at Walton Heath, where they have made the bunkers so deep that the ball inevitably stops in, and there is nothing for it but to ask the caddy for the niblick and resign yourself to losing a stroke. I should like to see the managers of other courses take a leaf out of the Walton Heath book. Bunkers that were once quite deep in the old days of the Gutty are in too many cases shallow and useless under the new conditions. I do think that the splendid state of the Walton Heath links is marvelous considering the short time that has elapsed since the club was formed. I have never played at Huntercombe, over which my old friend and opponent, Willie Park, has spent so much care and time and money, but I believe that it is similarly good, and I have heard golfers, for whose opinion I have the highest respect, declare enthusiastically that it is one of the best inland courses to be found anywhere, while the high hill air is splendid. Considering the many disadvantages under which they labor, particularly in the matter of soil, which is mostly of the clay variety, the links round about London may be considered good, and though the metropolitan golfer may not always appreciate the fact, during one period of the year he scores over all others. This is in the summertime, when the hot sun has at least dried and burnt up the grass on many seaside links and made them slippery and difficult even to walk upon. At such times the grass on the London links is still usually quite fresh and green, and not until some weeks later does it yield to the scorching rays. For the most part, too, the London links are exceedingly well kept. Lees, the greenkeeper at the Mid-Surrey course at Richmond, is the best man for that duty that I know. I cannot attempt to give any adequate information about the hundreds of links that are now dotted about all over the shires. It must suffice to say, in confining many to large centres, that I have pleasant memories of good golf that I have had on the fine courses at Lindrick in the Sheffield district, and at Trafford Park near Manchester. This is indeed a very nice inland course, with gravelly soil and a capacity for keeping dry during the winter. At Timperley there's another good links. The Huddersfield course is a splendid one to play upon, and very tricky too. Its merits are indicated by the quality of golfers that it breeds. It has made several men who have won the Yorkshire Championships, and in club matches the Huddersfield team is a very hard one to beat. There's one class of course of which I have not yet made any mention, and which I do not think it is necessary to do more than refer to. It is that mongrel kind, which is both seaside and inland, but which is in the full sense neither situated, that is, at a seaside resort, and may be in the very closest proximity to the sea, but with none of the properties of the real seaside course. No seaside turf, no sand dunes, no wild natural golf. These courses are usually elevated on cliffs. In many cases the golf that is to be obtained upon them is excellent, and I only wish to point out to unpracticed golfers who are about to start for a holiday and have taken no advice, that if they are making for a seaside place and want that kind of golf which they have heard is to be had at Deal, Sandwich, Rye, Westward Ho, Littlestone, St. Andrews, North Berwick, and scores of other places, they should make quite certain that they are taking their railway tickets in the proper direction. Otherwise, when they arrive upon the links that they have chosen, they may fail to discover any difference between the course visited and that on which they are in the habit of playing when at home. I only mention the matter because I have known so many cases of severe disappointment arise through mistakes of this kind. End of Chapter 20.
Chapter 21 of The Complete Golfer. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Ryan Powell. The Complete Golfer by Harry Vardon. Golf in America. I have a higher opinion of both the present and the future of golf in America than that which seems to be entertained by a large number of eminent players in this country. I think that American golf is very good at the present time, much better than it is given credit for being, and I am convinced that it will be still better in the future. I made a long golfing tour through the United States in 1900, when Englishmen for the most part regarded the game in that country with as much seriousness as they would have bestowed upon golf in Timbuktu if they had heard that it was being played there. At that time, it seemed to be taking a firm grip of our cousins, and I saw enough to convince me that America was coming on quickly, and that before long the old country would have reason to fear her. Everything that has happened since then has strengthened my belief, and the eyes of the British were at last fairly opened when the championship was played for at Sandwich in June of last year, when, to the chagrin of our own leading amateurs, an American, in the person of Mr. Walter J. Travis, became the victor and took back with him across the Atlantic the Amateur Championship Cup. So far from surprising me, that event was exactly what I expected. When I was in America, I played against Mr. Travis once or twice, and though he was then in the improving stage, and evidently not at the top of his career, I felt that he was a man who might very likely do great things in the future. Afterwards, I followed his play with some curiosity and interest. I saw that in the course of time he beat many good men whose form I understood precisely. I knew that he was one of the steadiest golfers I had ever seen, a man of fine judgment and marvelous exactness, who always played with his head and was constantly giving the closest possible study to the game. I felt that when he came to play for our championship, he would make a very bold bid for it. When I heard that he was going to Sandwich last year, I made him my tip for premier honors, and before the first round was played, I said to many friends, "Mark my words, if Travis gets anything like a fairly easy draw to start with, he will go right through." And so he did. I saw him play on this memorable occasion, which will never be forgotten as long as any of the events of golfing history are remembered, and, in opposition to the opinions of other British critics expressed in many columns of print during the weeks following, it was and is my absolute conviction that his was the best golf played in that tournament, and that he thoroughly deserved to win. He played with his head the whole way through, and his golf was really excellent. It was only natural that our people should be very downhearted when they saw what had happened, for it seemed nothing else than a great disaster. I do not think that in the long run it will prove to have been so, for the inevitable effect of it was to wake up our British golf, which stood sadly in need of arousing. I think that amateur golf in this country has been steadily depreciating for some time, and at the present moment, I think the standard of merit of our best players is lower than in the days when Mr. Harold Hilton, Mr. John Ball Jr., and the late Mr. Freddie Tate were at their best. And despite the American shock, I cannot profess that the outlook at the present moment is particularly encouraging. There are other good golfers in the States besides Mr. Travis, and, frankly, I think that unless we wake up in this country, the cup will go there again. For the moment, our numerical strength in the championship tournament is in our favor. When there are only half a dozen Americans entered out of a total number of over 100, the odds are evidently against them. But an American invasion is threatened, and then we shall see what we shall see. The chief reason why it is difficult to feel optimistic about the prospects of amateur golf in this country is because the rising generation, upon whom we must depend for our future champions, do not take sufficient pains to make themselves masters of the game. They are too haphazard in learning it. The beginners on our side are too apt to say to themselves, "I will go and teach myself to hit a ball first, and then I will take a lesson," which is, of course, entirely wrong. Then one of their friends tells them to do a certain stroke in one way, and another tells them in the opposite, and thus at the end of 6 months they have got into such a thoroughly bad style that it is the most difficult task in the world for a professional to set them right. Those who have the future of British golf at heart cannot afford to disregard or wink at these vagaries on the part of beginners, on whom we depend to constitute the national system in coming years. Now, the national system in America is altogether different. They are not haphazard there. They seem to take a deeper interest in the game and its science, and they never think of trying to learn it by the chance methods which are so much in favor with us. They take the game with the utmost seriousness from the very beginning, and obtain the very best advice that they can. The professionals never have a minute to spare, and their engagement books are constantly filled up for 3 weeks in advance, so that without the length of notice, nobody stands a chance of getting a lesson for love or money. That is the way in which the people of America are learning to play golf, and it is the proper way. It is slow, but it is very sure. And unless I'm very much mistaken, there will in the future be other players coming across the Atlantic to take part in our championships, who will be as great as Travis, if not greater. And if we, on our part, do not forthwith begin to take our golf more seriously, it may be a sad day for us when they do come. As I have said, American golf was only just budding when I made my tour through the country in 1900, but nevertheless, I found that tour extremely interesting and enjoyable, and everywhere I was given the heartiest and most enthusiastic reception. Nobody even begrudged me the American Championship, which I brought back with me, and nobody made any unkind criticisms of my play or suggested that I did not in any way deserve the victory. My tour began in March and did not finish until the end of the year, but was interrupted for a short period at the beginning of the summer when I made a flying trip home in order to take part in our own Open Championship. As it happened, the best that I could do was to finish second to Taylor, but I may add that this result was better than I expected, considering the sudden change of golf and climate that I experienced. I had to cover several thousands of miles in order to play the matches in which I took part in America. Of these matches, I only lost 2 when playing against a single opponent, and each time it was Bernard Nichols who beat me, first at Normand and then at Braeburn. There was not a blade of grass on the course on which Nichols won his first match from me, and I leave my readers to imagine what playing on a links consisting of nothing but loose sand was like. Altogether, I suffered only 13 defeats, but in 11 of them I was playing the best ball of 2 or more opponents, which was the task that was generally set me. I won over 50 matches and halved 2. Some of my victories were somewhat substantial. At Point Comfort, I beat Willie Dunn by 16 up and 15 to play, and at Scarsdale, I got the better of the same opponent to the extent of 15 and 14. Such wide margins naturally suggest opponents of inferior ability, but if I may modestly say so, I do not think that was wholly the case. I consider that at that time I was playing better golf than I had ever played before or have done since. As was the custom there, I used to go out on the links in the very thinnest and airiest costume. In Florida, it was too warm to play with either coat or vest, so both were discarded and shirt sleeves rolled up. Generally, like my opponents, I wore no jacket, but a neat waistcoat with sleeves which helped to keep the arms together. In such attire, one was afforded a delightful sense of ease and freedom, which considerably helped one's golf. Then again, whether it was due to the fine, dry atmosphere, as I think it was, or not, the ball certainly seemed to fly through the air with less resistance offered to it than I had ever experienced before. Never have I driven so well as I did with the old Gutty in America that year. Many of the professionals whom I met were men who were taught their golf in this country, and were players who would usually hold their own in the best of professional company. The American papers gave very lengthy reports of all the matches in which I took part, the headlines and what followed them being frequently very flattering. There was "The Golf King," and many such as that, and type nearly an inch deep. Perhaps I may, without offense, be permitted to quote from the account given in a leading daily newspaper of the second match, in which I defeated Willie Dunn at Scarsdale, which I only do for the purpose of showing that the conditions of play were sometimes really trying, and not at all conducive to big victories or record-breaking. This paper said, "If it were necessary to dwell upon the extraordinary consistency of the champion's game, one has only to refer to his card for the 4 rounds. It was a 9-hole course in yesterday's match, as his worst 9 holes totaled 41 and his best 37. If the turf could only unearth a thoroughbred as reliable as Vardon, pool rooms in Greater New York would be past history in very short order." Vardon's skill probably never underwent a severer test than in the match yesterday. Everything was against his exhibiting anything approaching championship form. he had not only to contend against a biting northwest wind, which temporarily got mixed up with the flurry of snow, but the course itself, from the character of the land, is about as difficult to score over as any in the country. The ground is one succession of kopjes, while 7 of the 9 holes are on the collar all the time, and at an angle from 20 to 30 degrees. The course is only 2,677 yards in playing distance. On paper, this gives the impression of being nothing out of the ordinary, but confronted with it in actuality, it is about as hard a proposition as any victim of the golf habit could tackle. The only course one can compare it with here is Oakland, and the latter is a billiard table by the side of it. At the finish of the 36 holes, Vardon said, "I never felt so fagged out in my life. In fact, I could play 72 holes on the other side of every day for a week and not have been so fatigued half so much." I don't remember that I ever committed myself to such an extravagant statement as this, but the course was certainly a very trying one that day. Yet on that occasion, I lowered the 18 holes record for the course. Altogether, I beat most of the records of the courses during my tour. The first time I ever took my clubs out on American soil, on the course of the Lawrence Harbor Country Club, I reduced the record for the 9 holes, held by Willie Dunn, from 41 to 40. Yet the weather was so bad just then, and the clay greens were in such a state of puddle, that temporary greens had to be made on the fairway. I won my first match by 9 up with 8 to play. On 1 or 2 occasions, I was obliged to beat the record in order to win my game. Thus, when playing on the Wheaton Links at Chicago, Will Smith was 3 up on me at one time, but by beating the Links record, I won at the finish by 2 up with 1 to play. This was one of the very toughest struggles I had over there. There was no mistaking the enthusiasm of the American spectators. They came to the matches in great crowds, always a large proportion of ladies, and they seemed bent on learning all that they could from the play. Everybody seemed to be trying to practice my grip. All kinds of theories were invented to account for the manner in which my shots came off. On one occasion, after I had got in a good one with a cleek, an excited spectator jumped the ropes, ran up to a friend of mine, and screamed, "Say, which arm did he do that with?" I looked to see if all my arms and legs were intact, or if there was anything that appeared unusual about them. I discovered afterwards that by arm he meant club. Many places of business were closed for the afternoon when I was playing in certain districts, and on one occasion the stock exchange did so. A letter to one of the papers, concerning the extraordinary manner in which America was taking the golf fever, contained these sentences: "I went into a leading business house today and found the 3 partners of the firm in a violent discussion. As I thought they were talking business, I concluded that my presence was unnecessary and started to edge away. Suddenly, I noticed the head of the firm rush into his office and rush out again with a cane. As the words were heated, I was just about to interfere when I saw a weapon appear on the scene. But the head partner wasn't looking for blood. Instead of hitting anyone, he swiped the cane along the ground, and then I heard the words, 'This is how Vardon holds it.' I wanted to make an appointment with one of the partners, but he told me that he wouldn't be in. However, I guess I'll meet him, because I'm going out to Dixie myself." The professionals in the golf shop suddenly began to do an enormous trade in sticks, and Bernard Nichols, the only man who defeated me single-handed, preferred not to play me again for a long time. He said his victory had done an enormous amount of good to his business, and he did not want to spoil it. From numerous quarters, I received all kinds of offers to star in one way or another, some very big fees being suggested. Would I become store manager at a huge salary? Would I make an exhibition for so many hours daily of driving golf balls in a padded room in the city? And so on. I actually did an offer one day to do exhibition swings in a room in a Boston store. I was to start at 9:30 and continue until 5 each day, doing tee and other shots into a net for half an hour at a time, and then resting for an hour before taking the next turn. There was a fresh house of about 200 people every time, and it was part of the bargain that my manager should stand by and explain everything. But he had had enough of it after 1 or 2 turns. Then I found it became terribly monotonous, and to interest myself, I kept trying to hit one particular spot on the wall near the ceiling, until the store's manager came forward in a state of great excitement, declaring that only 6 inches from that spot was the tap of a patent fire extinguishing arrangement, and that if I hit it, the room would be flooded by a series of water spouts in less time than I could imagine. By 4 o'clock, my hands were blistered badly, and at that stage, I had had enough and went out. In the meantime, I was the constant recipient of numerous presents of all kinds, and the invitations that I received to dinners were far too many for any professional golfer to accept. I do not mention these things with any desire for self-glorification. They are ancient history now, and nobody cares about them, but they serve to show the wholehearted manner in which America was going in for golf, and the tremendous hold that it took on the people. We talk on this side of the golfing fever, and of people going mad about the game. Believe me, the Britisher is a mere dahlier in comparison with his American golfing cousin. An interesting incident happened when the American Championship was played for on the Wheaton course, when, as I was informed, the game of golf achieved the most notable victory that it had ever achieved in the United States. This was the complete surrender to it of the veteran champion and overlord of baseball, the American national game. How that came about, I will leave one of the Chicago newspapers to relate. Cap Anson surrendered to golf yesterday. The capitulation of the veteran of America's national game took place on the links at Wheaton during the race between Harry Vardon and J.H. Taylor. Cap says the game of golf is a go. He has stood out against it and ridiculed it ever since it began to get the people. Anson knows Charles S. Cox, Vardon's manager, and accepted an invitation yesterday morning to look in on the game. On the links, he balked at the proposition of walking 4 miles in one trip around the course, but he lined up with the crowd to see Vardon drive off. The ball went higher than any fly Pop ever saw in his life. It sailed 220 yards. Anson was the first to start the applause with a "Good boy, she's a homer." Then he led the gallery to the first green. He was puffing when he pulled up at the 18th hole, but he felt better than if he had stolen second base. "I'd like to take a crack at that golf ball," he said. "You can put me down for a trial the first chance I get. Wouldn't mind togging up in kilts just to give the Prince of Wales a run for his money." For the sake of giving prominence to it, this paragraph was put in a fancy border and let into the middle of the sheet of newspaper, so the Chicago people evidently attached some importance to the capitulation of the worthy captain, and I hope that by this time he has had many thousands of cracks at the golf ball, and that his handicap is low. I was intent on making a bold bid for this American Open Championship. Victory in it seemed to be the one thing essential to make my trip the greatest possible success. My friend Taylor, who had just beaten me for the Open Championship at St. Andrews, had himself come over to the States and was also a candidate for the premier honors of American golf. As it turned out, we had practically the whole contest at Wheaton to ourselves, and a rare good duel it was, at the end of which I was at the top of the list, but only 2 strokes in front of my English opponent, while he was 8 in front of the next man. The system of deciding the championship was the same on this side, that is to say, 4 medal rounds were played, 2 on one day and 2 on the next, and at the end of the first day's play I was just 1 stroke better than Taylor. My score for the 2 rounds sprang 157 to his 158, and on the second day I did 156 to his 157, so that the whole event I was 313 to his 315. Taylor waited on the edge of the green while I holed out my last putt, and was the first to grasp my hand in sincere congratulation. Beautiful weather, the biggest golfing crowd ever seen in America up to that time, and a good links made the tournament a great success. The partner who went round with me during this championship competition was Will Smith, the holder who finished 5th. I had some curious experiences in the course of my journeyings about the country, and I'm not sure that they were all good for my game. During the early months I was down in Florida away from the cold and the snow. I met some good golfers there. It was necessary to play an entirely different game from that to which we were accustomed in this country. There was no grass on the putting greens. They were simply made of loose sand, sprinkled on the baked ground and watered and rolled. When there was a shortage of water and there was wind about, the fine part of the sand was blown away, and the surface of the greens then consisted of nothing but little pebbles. It was not easy to putt over this kind of thing, but I must not convey the impression that these sand greens were wholly bad. When properly attended to, they were really nice to putt upon after you have become accustomed to them. It was impossible to pitch onto them, and one had to cultivate the habit of running up from a very long distance. Thus I got into the way of playing a kind of stab shot. The tees consisted not of grass but of hard soil, and one had to tee up much higher than usual in order to avoid damaging the sole of the driver. This provoked the habit of cocking the ball up, and as a corrective, all the teeing grounds in Florida sloped upwards in front. Locusts were responsible for eating all the grass away from some courses, and I had a unique experience when I played Findlay at Portland. When we were on the putting greens, men had constantly to be beating sticks to keep the locust off the lines of our putts. If it struck a locust, the ball would come to a sudden stop. Acres and acres of land about there were without a single blade of grass. The locusts had eaten it all away. After we left Florida, we reached some good courses and resumed the old kind of play. It has often been suggested that the peculiar conditions of play in America, to which I was subjected for a long period, resulted in a permanent injury to my game as I played at home. And in light of reflection and experience, I am persuaded to think that this is so. I have played so well since then, have felt equal to doing anything that I ever did before, and have indeed won the championship, but I think I left a very small fraction of my game in the United States. In the way of other novel experiences, I might mention that on one occasion I played as Mr. Jones. I wanted a quiet day, and did not wish a too attentive public to know where I was. 3 friends joined me in a foursome, but when we went into the clubhouse after our game, another anxious golfer went up to my partner when I was standing by, and inquired of him whether he had heard that Vardon was playing on the links. My friend declared that he knew nothing of such a rumor, and I could hardly refrain from laughter as the anxious one went to pursue his inquiries in other quarters. Another time or two, other professionals and myself visited a course where we were unknown, and, hiding our identity, pretended that we were novices at the game, and begged of our caddies to advise us as to the best manner of playing each shot, which they did accordingly. We deliberately duffed most of our strokes at several holes, but this, of course, procedure tired us immensely, and so at last we abandoned it and began to play our natural game. Imagine the consternation and indignation of those caddies. Each one of them threw down his bag of clubs, and, declining to carry them for another hole, walked sulkily off the course. On one occasion we camped out for the night on the links on which we were playing, and a very pleasant variation from the ordinary routine we found it. The American newspapers, to which I have frequently referred, do their golf reporting very well. Their journalism may be sensational, or whatever you like to call it, but the golfing section of it was usually interesting, ingenious, and very intelligent and reliable. On the occasion of one match in which I played, a paper gave up nearly the whole one of its pages to a large panoramic view of the links. The flight of my ball, and that of my opponent, and the places where they stopped after every stroke, from the first to the last, were accurately marked. Thus the whole game was illustrated in a single picture, in a very effective manner. As was inevitable, I was sometimes victimized by interviewers who wrote interviews with me which I had never recorded, containing most amazing particulars about my methods and habits. Occasionally a reporter was turned on to describe a game when he knew nothing about golf, and then the results were sometimes amusing. One of these writers had it that I carried away the green with my drive. Another said I dropped dead at the hole. When playing at Washington against 2 opponents, I happened to beat bogey at the first hole. One of the reporters was told of this achievement, but did not quite understand it. Going to the next hole, we were walking through a bunker when he came up to me and politely inquired if the bunker was the kind of bogey that I had beaten. I was told a very good story of American golf reporting. A match was arranged between 2 well-known amateurs, one of whom happened to be a very rich banker. One reporter, who admitted that he knew nothing about the darned game, arrived rather late on the course, and borrowed the copy of an experienced golfing journalist for information of what had already happened. When this copy was duly returned with thanks, the latecomer remarked to his obliging friend, "Say, you made a bad mistake in one part." "What was it?" the other asked. "Wow, you say the so-and-so lipped the hole for a half." "Yes, that is right." "Oh, go away. You don't mean to tell me that a rich man like that would be playing for a paltry 50 cents? I've altered it to lip the hole for $100. And I remember that once, when I was playing the best ball of two amateurs, one of the reporters had been instructed by his chief to keep the best ball score. I happened to lose the match on the last green, but on looking through the paper the next morning, I was surprised to see it stated that I was beaten by not one, but many holes, making this defeat, in fact, the biggest inflicted on me during my tour. The paper said that it was. I could not make anything out of it for some time, until at last I discovered that the reporter had reckoned my score also in the best ball figures. Obviously, I cannot beat myself. The best I could do was to get a half, and that was how it came about that I never won a single hole in the Harry Vardon versus Harry Vardon and two others match. End of Chapter 21, Golf in America.
Chapter 22 of The Complete Golfer. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Claire. The Complete Golfer by Harry Vardon. Concerning caddies. The caddy is an indispensable adjunct to the game of golf, and for the most part he fulfills his functions very capably. But there are caddies of every imaginable variety, and their vagaries are such as to cause wonderment on the part of their employers sometimes, amusement at others, and not infrequently exasperation. Some of them know too much about the game, and others far too little, and I hardly know which of these classes is in the long run the worse for the golfers who engage them to carry their clubs. An incident of which I had heard that happened to a well-known player on the North Berwick links must have been very trying to him. On a busy day, all the regular caddies had been engaged, and the fishermen were drafted into the club-carrying service. The player, having asked one of the fishermen if he knew anything about the game, and having been informed that he had only a little knowledge of it, resigned himself calmly to the inevitable, and told the man complacently that he would do. This player happened to be left-handed, and took up his stance on the first tee accordingly, whereupon the son of the sea at once adopted the part of tutor, and with some warmth and show of contempt exclaimed loudly, "I dinna ken much aboot the game, but ye dinna ken a wee bit. Mon, ye're standing on the wrong side of the ba. Awa to the other side." Golfers at the beginning of a round are proverbially susceptible to small influences, and when a player is accustomed to lean somewhat upon his caddy, as even some of the best occasionally do, I can well imagine that such a trivial matter as this is enough to mar a tee shot. There were some strange specimens of the caddy species at Ganton when I was there. "Make a tee, boy," said a golfer to one of them, evidently a novice, one day. The player had been waiting about for something under a minute, while his servant showed no sign of making the usual preparations for the tee shot. The boy did not seem to understand. "Make a tee, boy," exclaimed the player a second time sharply, but still there was no response, and then the man called for some sand, bent down and made the tee himself. At this the boy attributed the failure of his understanding to the player's limited powers of expression, and somewhat scornfully exclaimed, "Why, if you had told me it was a cockshot that was wanted, I should have known what you meant." On competition days at Ganton, we often had to secure a number of lads who had never seen the game played before, and very interesting specimens of the youth of Yorkshire they often were. One day, I remember, a competitor pulled his ball very badly, and his caddy, who had gone on a little way in front, received it hard on a very tender part of his head. He was not seriously hurt, but much pained, and forthwith, excusably perhaps, he gave way to tears. To soothe him, his employer presented him with half a sovereign. The tears suddenly ceased, the boy's face broke into a happy smile, and a moment later, when the two were trudging away towards the hole, the youngster ingenuously inquired, "Will you be coming out again this week, sir?" There is a kinship between this story and that of the caddy at North Berwick, son of the greenkeeper there, some years ago, when first he began to carry clubs. He was a very precocious little fellow, and the player for whom he had been engaged to carry for that day was a well-known golfer from the south. When the day's play was far advanced and the time of reckoning was drawing nigh, the boy seized an opportunity of sidling close up to his patron, and asking him, "Do you ken Bob?" the said Bob being one of the nobilities of the links. The player answered that he had not the pleasure of Mr. Robert's acquaintance so far, and inquired of the boy why he asked such a question. "Weel," was the answer, It's a pity you dinna ken Bob. He's a rael fine gentleman, for he aye gies 2 shilling a round for carrying till him. No like some that can themselves gentlemen and only gie a shilling. But lest it should be imagined from the recital of these incidents that the caddy is invariably over-greedy, and that he has no soul for anything but the pecuniary reward of his service, let there by way of contrast be told the story of the boy who was willing to carry clubs for nothing, the one solitary instance of such a disposition to self-sacrifice that there is on record. This time the golfer was not a great one. He had his faults, and they were numerous, and for their conquest and suppression he came to the conclusion that it would be better if he went out alone over the links and wrestled with them determinedly. A caddy watching him go out thus solitary and felt sorry, so he said to him, "I will carry your clubs for a shilling, sir." But the golfer replied, "No, my boy, not today, thanks, I will carry them myself." The golfer missed his drive, foozled his second, put his third into a bunker, and endured other agonies. The caddy had been following at a respectful distance, and when the ball had been duly picked up out of the bunker, he made a further appeal. "I will carry for 9 pence, sir." "No, I do not want a caddy," was the answer again. "I will carry for 6 pence, then." "No, go away." On the next tee, the player, overcome by conflicting emotions, missed the ball altogether 2 or 3 times, and then was the caddy's opportunity, which he seized without hesitation. "I will carry for the fun of the thing, sir." This is a digression, but I fear that digressions are inevitable when one enters upon the subject of caddies, and is persuaded to dip into one's recollection of caddy stories. The ignorant caddy is trying, but not less is the one who knows too much about the game, or thinks he does, and insists upon inflicting his superior knowledge upon you during the whole course of the round. Once when I was playing for the championship, my clubs were carried by a caddy who swore horribly at me all the time, notwithstanding that from the beginning I was going strongly for the first place. That boy got on my nerves. I was approaching well, but my putting was certainly not so sure and confident as it might have been. "What is the good of shooting at the flag if you can't putt worth a—" he exclaimed in great disgust on one occasion when I had the misfortune to miss holing out a somewhat short putt. He has begged to be allowed to carry for me many times since then, but I have steadfastly refused his offer, for I would not be handicapped with him upon any consideration. The caddy I like the best of all, and he who I am convinced is the best servant for the average golfer, is he who thoroughly understands the game, has a deep knowledge of the course that is being played over, knows exactly what club to give you upon any and every occasion, and limits its functions to giving you that club without being asked for it. This caddy is a silent caddy, who knows that words of his are out of place, and that they would only tend to upset his master's game. It will generally be found that he, above all others, is the only one who takes a deep and sympathetic interest in that game. He never upon any consideration gives advice without being asked for it. On the other hand, he takes care that no act or omission of his shall ever cause his man the most momentary irritation, for he has sufficient knowledge of the golfer's temperament to know that these trifles are a constant source of bad holes. When the player is preparing for his shot and his eye is wandering anxiously between the ball and the hole, he puts out his hand whilst still continuing his survey of the ground, and as he puts it out he feels it grasp the handle of the exact club that is wanted. There is little need to look at it. The caddy knew and acted. The stance is taken while the player is still in his thoughtful mood. The shot is made while his mind is still concentrated to the utmost extent on the difficult task in hand, and then, after a happy result, the player and this faithful, truly sympathetic caddy go quietly on their way. When you are on the green, he never needs to be told to go to the pin. He is always there, standing at the hole as soon as the time has come to putt, and while, if the putt is a poor thing, he has nothing to say, for silence is more than ever welcome at such a time of sorrow and disappointment. He permits himself a few courteous words of congratulation if a great success has been achieved at the last stroke at the hole, and the crown been placed upon an effort that has been truly praiseworthy throughout. This is my ideal caddy, and I am prepared to make some concessions to have him always at my side during the most trying rounds that I have to play. If he always performs the duties I have named, promptly and quietly, I do not care whether he really knows much about the game or not. If a caddy does the round of a course often enough in the company of good golfers, he knows the club to use for every particular stroke, even though he may have no practical knowledge of the game, and I ask nothing more of him than that he should always hand the club to me without keeping me waiting for a single moment. These caddies are a rarer species than the others. I am no advocate of female labor, but I have often, after an experience of the girl caddy, been tempted to wish that there were more of them in the land, for they are uncommonly good. The little girl of humble lot seems, 9 times out of 10, to possess all those qualities which go to the making of a good caddy, according to my standards of a good caddy, in a remarkable degree. Unlike some of her elder sisters, she never talks, but she always watches the game very closely and takes a deep interest in it. She is most anxious, if anything too anxious, to do her service properly and well, and to the most complete satisfaction of the gentleman who will reward her for it at the finish. She never keeps you waiting for your bag. The clubs are always there at your hand. If it is obvious to this little girl's simple intelligence that you want your brassy, she has it ready for you. If there is a doubt about the club, she does not make the mistake of offering you one on chance, as it were. She is too timid for that. She holds the bag before you and lets you choose yourself and carry all the responsibility on your own shoulders. The good boy caddy, whom I have referred to as my ideal, does that also. I said he was always waiting with the club ready, but if it is evident to him, as to the player, that it is a difficult question of judgment as to which particular club should be taken in somewhat puzzling circumstances, he allows the golfer to make his choice from the whole collection in the bag, making no suggestion of his own either by word or movement, unless invited to do so. Cannot every golfer recall numberless instances of bad shots and holes lost because in one of these moments of doubt, when his own inclination was leaning to the employment of one particular club, his caddy thrust another before him? Feeling that there must be something good in the caddy's recommendation, he has been tempted in spite of himself to use it. How frequently are the consequences disastrous in such circumstances as these, and how unenviable are the golfer's after reflections upon its own weakness. Yes, decidedly the girl caddy excels. I have seen her on many links up and down the country, and she is always good. In one of my last matches last season, at Luton, I had one to carry for me, and she was as good as any. Perhaps it may be urged by some players that it is not a good thing for girls to do this work. About that I have nothing to say. I only know that they do their duty well. A peculiarly caustic but half unconscious humor is a characteristic of caddies everywhere, but particularly in the North, and while golfers continue to lack absolute perfection, and their ministering attendants to expect it from them every time, it will probably remain a characteristic. A fair specimen was the remark of his caddy to a player whose handicap was several strokes removed from scratch, and who, having become badly bunkered on one occasion, tried nearly every iron club in his bag in a vain endeavor to get out. The case was heartbreaking, and he turned despairingly to his caddy with the question, "What on earth shall I take now?" There was little encouragement in the answer. "Take the 4.5 train." There is a good story also of a certain Welshman of title who became enthusiastic over the game, though he did not excel at it. He conceived that it would be a good thing to make a tour of the famous Scottish courses with the object of improving his play, and in due season he arrived at a certain famous green, where he employed as his caddy an individual who had a considerable reputation for blunt candor. The turf suffered severely every time this player made use of his irons, and the caddy shook his head gloomily and sadly as he witnessed the destructive work that went on daily. At last there came a day when he could stand it no longer, and when the Welshman had taken a mighty swipe at the ball with a heavy iron, and made a deep excavation for several inches behind it, the club carrier moaned painfully, "O Lord, man, high mercy on pure auld Scotland." It is said that the golfer played no more on those links. It was on the same course that 2 players went out one morning to play, and found a friend waiting alone on the first tee, who said that he had fixed up a match with a certain Captain Blank, who would be coming along presently. The possibility of a foursome was considered, and a question was asked as to what kind of player the captain was, his partner replying, "Oh, he is excellent. He drives a good ball, plays his irons well, and is exceedingly useful at the short game. In fact, he is a first-rate all-around man." Expecting confirmation of this eulogium, he turned to his caddy and said, "You know the captains play well enough. Now what sort of a player would you say he is?" The caddy replied scornfully, "Captain Blank, he canna play a shot worth a D. He's nae better than yourself." The fact is that no player is great in the eyes of his caddy, for on one occasion, when 2 gentlemen who were very fair hands at the game were doing a round, and being closely pressed by a couple behind, who seemed to be driving inordinately long balls, One of them observed that perhaps they had better let them go through, as they seemed to be playing both well and quickly. "Nay, nay, nothing of the kind," interposed one of the caddies. "They're just twa duffers like yourselves. And great eminence in other fields counts for nothing with the caddy if his man cannot golf in good style. There is the story told by Mr. Balfour of the distinguished general, hero of many battles, who, having duly found his way into his 20th bunker, was startled by a cry of irritation from his caddy. 'Come, come, old gentleman, this will never do.' This great statesman golfer relates another anecdote showing that caddies are much the same as the whole world over. An English golfer was playing at Powell and had a French caddy attending upon him. He made one particularly fine approach shot, and as golfers will at such times, he turned round to the boy with excusable vanity for applause. But the boy's English vocabulary so far comprised only 2 words which he had heard uttered on several occasions, but the sense of which he did not understand. Feeling sure, however, that they must be appropriate to this occasion, and desiring to be appreciative, he smiled pleasantly into the golfer's face and murmured, "Beastly fluke." Mr. Balfour, by the way, had a particular and decided taste in caddies, for he has written that he can gladly endure severe or even contemptuous criticism from them, can bear to have it pointed out to him that all his misfortunes are the direct and inevitable result of his own folly, can listen with equanimity when failure is prophesied of some stroke he is attempting, and can note unmoved the self-satisfied smile with which the fulfillment of the prophecy is accentuated. But ignorant and stupid indifference is intolerable to him. The caddy, in the statesman's opinion, is not and ought not to be regarded as a machine for carrying clubs at a shilling a round, but rather occupies or ought to occupy the position of the competent adviser or interested spectator. The caddy ought to be as anxious for the success of his side as if he were one of the players, and should watch each move in the game with benevolent if critical interest, being always ready with the appropriate club, and, if need be, with the appropriate comment. But I don't like to see this anxiety for the success of one's fortunes upon the links carried to excess. It is then a disturbing factor, and its humorous aspect does not always appeal to one as it should. Some golfers might be flattered when they come to know that their caddies have backed them to the extent of half of the remuneration they will receive for carrying the clubs for the round. It is a touching expression of the caddy's belief in them. But after all, this kind of thing does not help to make a good caddy. Apart from other considerations, it does not make the boy carry any the better because he is over-anxious about the result of the match. And, though some golfers might be inclined to ridicule the suggestion, it nevertheless is a disturbing element in one's game if one knows that even the caddy will be very deeply concerned if every stroke does not come off just as well as it ought to do. The caddy is not above letting you know of his wager. Sometimes he will even tell you of it. 2 golfers of some Highland celebrity were playing a match one day at Luffness, and after a hard round they came to the 18th tee all square and but this one hole to play. At this critical stage of the game, the caddy of one of them approached his master and nervously whispered to him, "Please, sir, wad you do your very best here, for there's money on this match." And the golfer did try to do his very best indeed, but he pressed and he foozled, and he lost the hole and the match. Sympathetically, he turned to his caddy to ask him what was the amount of the lost wager, that he might pay it for him and soften his disappointment. "It was a penny, sir," said the boy. But despite his constant sarcasm and his utter inability to tolerate anything except the very best in golf, there is after all much good human kindness in your caddy if he is worthy of the name. Big Crawford will always be remembered as a fine specimen. On the day when Mr. A.J. Balfour played himself into the captaincy of the Royal and Ancient Club, a gentleman who was looking on, and who was well acquainted with the fact that when Mr. Balfour was in Ireland as Chief Secretary, he never played a round of any of the Irish links without having plain-clothes detectives walking fore and aft, inquired very audibly, "Is there no one looking after Mr. Balfour now?" Big Crawford was carrying for him that day, and he heard the question. He turned with a look of severe pride towards the quarter whence it came, and answered it as loudly, "I'm looking after Master Balfour." There was nothing more to be said. The chief of the Conservatives has certainly an enormous popularity with the caddies. He so evidently loves his golf so much, and he has great sympathy with them. He bears amiably with their weaknesses. He was one day playing a match with Tom Dunn, who was his tutor, at North Berwick, and by a mixture of skill and luck was enabled to hole out at Point Garry out in 2. It happened that he received a stroke from Dunn at this hole, and the caddy ingeniously pointed out to him that this was thus entitled to consider that he had done the hole in one. "How excellent," he said, but in the same breath the caddy begged leave to remind him that it was customary for all good golfers to celebrate the performance of this particular feat by the bestowal of some special token upon their caddies. Mr. Balfour was amused. He tantalized the boy by observing that rather than that he should have to pay anyone for watching him to do these great things, he surely ought to receive remuneration from all the spectators for doing them. The boy felt sure that there was truth in this new view of things, and a sad look was stealing over his face when the right honorable gentleman handed over to him the customary fee. Another time on the links, 2 officers, a colonel and a major, were playing in front of Mr. Balfour and his partner, when the latter were courteously invited to go through so that their enjoyment of the round would not be interfered with by any waiting. At the moment when Mr. Balfour was passing the others, he was surprised to hear a word of command called out by the colonel's caddy, who happened to be a Lucknow veteran. "Attention! Eyes front! Shoulder arms! Present arms!" And thereupon each of the caddies took from his bag a driver, and with it presented arms in proper soldiery style. Mr. Balfour, who was chief secretary at the time, smiling with pleasure at the interesting compliment and acknowledging the salute. He has a remarkable memory for the caddies who have served him, and once, when on the tee, just about to engage in a foursome, he recognized one of his opponent's caddies as a boy who on a former occasion had carried his own clubs, and he nodded to him kindly. Naturally, the caddy was immensely pleased, and turning to one of his colleagues, he remarked, "You see who we conservatives can ein another?" Another instance of the deep humanity of Big Crawford, whom I have just mentioned, occurred on one occasion when he was carrying for an Edinburgh clergyman who was going in for the Redan, had the misfortune to be badly bunkered, his ball, in addition to the other difficulties of the situation, lying in a deep heel mark. He was palpably in great agony of mind, all the greater in that he never uttered a word. Crawford crept quietly to his side and whispered gently, "What a peety, what a peety. But gin an eighth wad relieve ye, sir, dinna mind me, dinna mind me." And thereupon he discreetly retired for some little distance. Sandy Smith, another famous caddy, was one day carrying for a player who had the good fortune to be no fewer than 6 holes up on his opponent by the time the 8th hole was reached. At this green, something having gone wrong with the reckoning of the strokes, there was a mild dispute as to whether the hole had been won by Sandy's man or whether it had been halved. Eventually it was agreed that it was halved, but as the players moved away to the next tee, he who was 6 down being out of earshot in front, his opponent remarked to Sandy, "You know, Sandy, I still think I won that hole after all." Sandy seemed shocked at such a cold-blooded greed for holes, and reprovingly, very seriously and sharply said to his employer, "Haud your tongue, sir, haud your tongue. Wad you break the man's heart?" Sandy used to remark that the finest golfer on the green was Master Edward Blythe, and it was not until he had expressed this opinion with an almost wearying frequency that his hearers suspected that there was some connection between his choice and the fact, which he admitted one day, that his auld claws fit me best. Apparently he had the measure of every player on the course. "I'm wanting a word with ye, Mr. Blythe," he said to his favourite one day. "What is it, Sandy?" "It's no muckle, sir, it's just this, you ken. I'm wanting an auld suit o' claws from ye. You're the only man hereabout that'll fit me." But apparently there were others, for one day when a player for whom he was carrying asked him if he knew the Lord Justice Clerk, who happened just then to be passing in a foursome, Sandy replied, "That's Lord Kingsbury, you mean. Oh aye, he's a great friend o' mine. Nobody kens his lordship better nor me. That's his breeks, I've on." Golfers should, I think, sometimes be on their guard lest a too kind-hearted caddy, in an excess of zeal for his employer, should be tempted to transgress the laws of the game, or depart from strict truthfulness in his behalf. Sometimes it is done with a wonderful air of innocence and simplicity. Caddies have been known, when their employers have been in doubt as to exactly how many strokes they have played at certain holes, to give an emphatic but none the less untruthful declaration on the side of fewness. They mean well, but mistakenly, and it is the better for everybody concerned, but particularly for the caddies, that they should be severely reprimanded when there is a reason to doubt their good faith. And who shall say that another, and for our purposes the final characteristic of the average caddy of experience, is not a wonderful amount of solid, worldly common sense of a variety specifically adapted to golf? And what golfer is there who has not at one time or another had the advantage of it? But he may at the time have been unconscious of the assistance. There is a historic case of the caddy on the Scottish links who warned a beginner, dallying too much on the tee, that he mauna address the bossy muckle. Forthwith, the southern tyro, greatly exasperated at his own failures, burst out, "So far as I know, I haven't said a word to the infernal thing, but the irritation of this beastly game is enough, and if I have any more of your confounded tongue, you may repent it." Then the caddy murmured to himself, "I dinna like his look. I'll better get him round as pleasant as possible." Could any advice have been more delicately worded than that of the caddy to the stout clergyman, who, with all of his strength, made a most mighty swing at his ball on the tee with the usual result, a foozle? "It'll nae do, sir. You canna drive as far as that." What do you mean by such a remark? "As far as what?" gasped the reverend but irate gentleman. "I just mean, sir, that ye canna drive as far as ye would like." Perhaps we shall never hear the best caddy stories, for it is not likely that a great abundance of them are made and told in the sheds after the day's play is over, and when the golfer's tools are being wiped and cleaned, and his irons burnished to a beautiful brightness. It is then that the caddy is in his happiest vein, his tongue and disposition untrammeled by the presence of the club members. "What are ye doing, cleaning them clubs so grand?" asked one caddy of another, who was evidently bestowing unusual pains on the polishing of the set that were in his keeping. The caddy was in a thoughtful mood. He was the regular attendant of an old golfer who had a most disastrous day. "I'm to clean 'em better than ever," he answered, "and when I've cleaned 'em, I've got to break 'em across my knee, and then I've got to chuck 'em in the blooming river." Sometimes, we see, if he is a simple-hearted, faithful caddy, his lot is not a happy one. End of chapter 22.
Chapter 23 of The Complete Golfer. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Complete Golfer by Harry Vardon, Chapter 23. Chapter 23, Reflections and Recollections. I think that every good golfer of experience reflects upon his past history with mingled pleasure and sorrow. Pleasure when he calls to mind all the many glorious matches in which he has taken part, and sorrow when the thought arises that all that golf has been played and done with, and can never be played again. But we have all this abiding consolation, that even if we cannot retain our very best form to the end of our days, we can still hope to play a good game to the finish. And there is the heroic example of rare old Tom Morris to stimulate us in this hope. Much is given to golfers, perhaps more than to the participators in any other sport, but they are rarely satisfied. The wonderful fascination of golf is indicated in this eternal longing for more. Sometimes, when I glance over the records of the history of the game, I feel a twinge of regret that it was not possible for me to play with, or even to see, such giants of the past as Allen Robertson, David Strath, the Dunns, Willie Campbell, Willie Park Sr., or the famous young Tom Morris. Golf is great today, but it must have been great in those days also, even if there was less of it than there is now. But I have had the good fortune to play with all the well-known amateurs and professionals of my own time, and it is pleasant to think that they are nearly all still alive, and that therefore I may sometime or another play with them again. There is one great exception, Mr. Fred Tate, who was killed in South Africa. I don't think anyone could have ever had the smallest doubt about the reason for his enormous popularity. I had the delight of playing against him 2 or 3 times, and I thought that he was not only a very fine golfer indeed, but one of the very finest gentlemen that I could imagine. It is something for me to remember that I played in the last important match in which he figured before he went out to the war, an international foursome, England versus Scotland, that was played at Ganton. Willie Park and Mr. Tate representing Scotland, while Mr. John Ball Jr. and I were for England. From all the amateurs with whom I have ever come in contact, I have always received the greatest kindness and encouragement, and I do not know a single one with whom I would not like to play again some day or other. It has always seemed to me that there is something about golf that makes a man a good fellow, whether he is amateur or professional. I wish to speak in the same way about my professional brothers as I have done about the amateurs. I have always found them all first-class sportsmen in the strictest and best sense of the word, and some of the best friends I have in the world are among them. There are some very fine players among the professionals of today. I have often watched and greatly admired the splendid skill of such friends and constant opponents as J.H. Taylor, James Braid, Alexander Hurd, Jack White, and many others whose names would fill a page, not forgetting my own brother Tom. I have, from time to time, been indebted to many of them for various acts of kindness. There is a fine spirit of Freemasonry among us professionals. Whenever we play against each other, each of us does his level best to win, and gives no quarter with a single stroke. But it has been my invariable experience that when the match is over, the loser is always the first to congratulate the winner, and to do it not as a mere matter of form, but with the utmost sincerity. And here I should like to say a few words with the object of removing a misconception which still seems to linger in the minds of followers of the game. Dear me, Vardon, what a grand time you fellows have, traveling all over the country in this manner, and doing nothing but playing golf on the very best courses, is the kind of remark that often greets me when I have just returned from playing in one match or tournament, and I am due to start for another in a day or two. But I am not sure that we have such a grand time as those who say these things seem to think. We enjoy it just because we enjoy everything connected to golf, and particularly the playing of it. But playing these exhibition matches is not quite the same thing as going away for the weekend and having a quiet round or two with a friend, however hard you may try to beat him. Some people entertain a fancy that we do not need to strain ourselves to the utmost in these engagements, and that therefore we take things easily. I can answer for myself, and I am sure for all my brother professionals, that we never take things easily, that we always play the very best golf of which we are capable, and that if a championship rested on each match, we could not play any better. It must be remembered that when we are invited by any club to play an exhibition match, that club expects to see some golf. And thus it happens that the fear of a great responsibility is always overhanging us. We dare not play tricks with such reputations as we may have had the good fortune to obtain. We are always well aware that there are very good golfers in the crowd who are watching and criticizing every stroke that we make. Therefore, we keep ourselves in the very best of condition and do our utmost to always play our best. How difficult is our task when sometimes we are not feeling as well as we might wish, as must occasionally happen. I will leave the charitable reader to imagine. Has he ever felt like playing his best game when a little below par in either mind or body? This is where the really hard work of the professional's life comes in. There is no close season in golf, as in cricket, football, and other sports. When a cricketer plays indifferently, after 2 months of the game, his admirers cry out that he is stale and needs a rest. But there are 11 players on each side in a cricket match, and constant rests for all of them, so that to my mind, their work is very light in comparison with that of the golfer, who enjoys no close season, and has all the work of each match on his own shoulders. Surely, he also must become stale, but such a state on his part is not tolerated. Again, one often hears that a certain match between professional players has been halved purposely. That is to say, that it was an arranged thing from start to finish. Such things may have happened in other sports, but take it from me that it never, never happens in golf. One man never plays down to another, whatever disparity there may be in their respective degrees of skill. It does not matter how many holes one is up on one's opponent. There is never any slackening until the game has been won. It makes no difference if the man you are playing against is your very best friend or your brother, and one has sometimes to pass through the trying ordeal of straining his every nerve to win a match when in his heart of hearts, for some particular reason, he would like to see the other man win. I intrude these affairs of our own in these concluding reflections, only for the purpose of indicating that, though we love our game and always enjoy it, professional golf is not quite the same thing as that played by amateurs, and must not be judged from the same standpoint. I think it is because of this continual sense of a great responsibility that the custom and necessity of always, absolutely always, trying to play our very best game, that the leading professionals are constantly a stroke or two better than the most skillful amateurs, even though the latter practice the game quite as much, and have apparently just as much opportunity, or even more, of making themselves perfect. I have mentioned the spectators. I have generally found that the crowds who follow a big professional match round the links, both highly intelligent and exceedingly considerate. But sometimes we overhear some strange things said. Taylor and I were once fulfilling an important engagement together, and when my opponent had a particularly difficult shot to play, two ladies came up quite close to him and persisted in talking in a loud tone of voice. Taylor waited for a little while in the hopes that their chatter would cease, but it did not. Then, in a feeling of desperation, he attempted to address his ball, but the task was hopeless. The conversation went on more loudly than ever, and he was doomed to certain failure if he attempted his stroke in these circumstances. So he stood up again and looked round in the direction whence the voices came. "Oh," said one of the ladies then, "you can go on now. We've quite finished." We must be thankful for small mercies. James Braid and I were once playing down at Beckenham. At one of the putting greens, we were both a long way from the hole. My ball was a trifle the more distant of the two, and so I played the odd and managed to get down a wonderfully fine putt. Then Braid played the like and holed out also. These were two rather creditable achievements with our putters. When the ball had trickled safely into the hole, and the spectators were moving toward the next tee, Braid and I were amused, but not flattered, by the words of a man who was speaking to a friend in such a loud voice that we could all hear. "Oh," he exclaimed depreciatingly, "those fellows only do that sort of thing for the sake of the applause." How happy we should be if we could always make certain of those long putts without any applause at all. It was with Braid also that I was playing in a match at Luton toward the close of last year, when I overheard a singular remark. I happened to be bunkered at the 14th, and took my niblick to get out, but lost the hole. We walked on together to the next tee, and Braid was taking his stance, when we heard two gentlemen eagerly discussing and explaining the recent bunker incident. Evidently, one of them was supposed to know something of golf, and the other nothing at all. "You see," said the former to his friend, "there is really no rule in the matter at all. Vardon, or any other player, could have used a shovel in that bunker, and have simply shoveled the ball over on to the other side." I was surprised that Braid got his next tee shot in so well as he did. And how very often I have heard the question asked in the crowd, "Why do those fellows chalk the faces of their clubs?" And how, invariably, the answer has been, "So that they can see afterwards where they hit the ball." When I write my recollection of these things, I do not wish it to be imagined that I am making any sort of accusation against golf crowds generally. They are excellent from all points of view. But it must inevitably happen that there are some people among them who know little of the game, and others who do not appreciate what a trying ordeal a hard-fought match usually is. Such questions are often put to me as, "Vardon, what was the greatest match in which you ever played?" Or, "What was the most extraordinary occurrence you have ever seen on the links?" And so forth. They are questions which it is difficult to answer. For is not nearly every match that we play brim full of incident and interest? And at the time, do we not regard many of the incidents as most extraordinary? It would, then, be too serious a task to attempt a selection from such a huge mass. But, looking back over the last few years, it seems that my 100-pound match with Willie Park is that which remains uppermost in my mind, and the one that I am least likely to forget. There was more talking and writing about it than any other match in which I have played. The gallery that followed this match was the greatest I have ever seen or heard of. And as I am questioned also about the curious and the singular in golf, I may say that there was a coincidence in this game that struck me at the time as being quite unusual. In a closely fought match, it is often interesting to notice how nearly each player's ball often follows the other. Frequently they are side by side within 1 or 2 clubs' length after the drive from the tee. But in the first stage of this match against Park, after he had driven a long ball from the tee at the 11th hole, I drove, and my ball pitched exactly on top of his. The Messrs. Hunter were kindly serving in the capacity of 4 caddies, and they were both positive upon this incident. My ball, after striking his, rebounded slightly, and then stopped dead about 2 feet behind. Its position rather affected my follow-through, so that I duffed my stroke and lost the hole. This record, if it was a record, was also the means of eclipsing what I believe was another record in first-class golf. The first 10 holes in this match were halved, and it was the incident of which I have just been speaking and the duffed stroke that followed it that led to the breaking of the sequence. "Now, Vardon, how often have you holed out and won?" they ask me also, regardless of the fact that this event demands not only a perfect shot, but a perfect fluke, and that the professional player is no more likely to accomplish it than anyone else. Well, I have only been guilty of this fluke on one occasion, and that was not so very long ago. And when it happened, it was at a hole a little over 200 yards in length. On one occasion also, I have enjoyed the coincidence of holing out with my mashie approach at the same hole twice in one day. That was in the course of a tournament at Ely, in which I had the good fortune to finish first. As it happened, Andrew Kirkcaldy, who hoped to end high up in the list, was my partner for the first round, and it came about also that he was watching me play when the holing out process was accomplished for the second time. Then he lifted up his hands in horror and delivered himself of his famous remark, "You're enough to break the heart of an iron ox." During the last round of this same tournament, Andrew, who was playing some holes behind me, and was then himself in the running for the first place, was kept posted up by a friend as to my score for each hole. He did not seem to derive much encouragement from the reports, for when the last one was carried to him, he asked the friend who brought it if he thought that there was nobody who could play golf besides Vardon, and intimated at the same time that if anyone else brought him any more of those tales, he would strike him with his niblick. Of course, we all know what a really fine fellow is Andrew Kirkcaldy, and how much poorer the golf world would be without his presence and his constant humor. And now I think I have holed out on the last green, and this long match is finished. After all, it is better to play golf than to write or read about it. What anticipation is more gloriously joyful than that of the man who handles his driver on the first tee on a bright morning of the springtime? He has all the round, and all the day, and all the spring and summer and autumn before him. And at this moment, another spring is breaking brightly, and the golf that is before each of us promises to be as momentous and soul-satisfying as any that has gone before. End of chapter 23. Read by J. D. Malloy, June 2023.
Section 24 of The Complete Golfer. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Complete Golfer by Harry Vardon. Appendix. The Rules of Golf. Appendix. The Rules of Golf. Authorized by the Royal and Ancient Golf Club of St. Andrews, revised by the club to September 27, 1904, and in force at the date of publication of this work. 1. Definitions. A. The game of golf is played by two sides, each playing its own ball. The side consists either of one or of two players. If one player play against another, the match is called a single. If two play against two, it is called a foursome. One player may play against two playing one ball between them, when the match is called a threesome. Matches constituted as above shall have precedence of, and be entitled to pass any other kind of match. B. The game consists in each side playing a ball from a teeing ground into a hole by successive strokes, and the hole is won by the side which holds its ball in fewer strokes than the opposite side, except as otherwise provided for in the rules. If the sides hole out in the same number of strokes, the hole is halved. C. The teeing ground is the starting point for a hole, and shall be indicated by two marks placed in a line as nearly as possible at right angles to the course. The hole shall be 4 1/4 inches in diameter and at least 4 inches deep. D. The putting green is all ground within 20 yards of the hole, except hazards. E. A hazard is any bunker, water, except casual water, sand, path, road, railway, whin, bush, rushes, rabbit scrape, fence or ditch. Sand blown onto the grass, or sprinkled on the course for its preservation, bare patches, sheep tracks, snow, and ice are not hazards. Permanent grass within a hazard is not part of the hazard. F. Through the green is any part of the course except hazards and the putting green which is being played to. G. Out of bounds is any place outside the defined or recognized boundaries of the course. H. Casual water is any temporary accumulation of water, whether caused by rainfall or otherwise, which is not one of the ordinary and recognized hazards of the course. I. A ball is in play as soon as the player has made a stroke at the teeing ground in each hole, and remains in play until holed out, except when lifted in accordance with the rules. J. A ball has moved only if it leave its original position in the last degree and stop at another, but if it merely oscillate, without finally leaving its original position, it is not moved. K. A ball is lost if it be not found within 5 minutes after the search for it has begun. L. A match consists of 1 round of the links, unless it be otherwise agreed. A match is won by the side which is leading by a number of holes greater than the number of holes remaining to be played. If each side win the same number of holes, the match is halved. M. A stroke is any movement of the ball caused by the player, except as provided for in Rule 3, or any downward movement of the club made with the intention of striking the ball. N. A penalty stroke is a stroke added to the score of a side under certain rules and does not affect the rotation of play. O. The honour is the privilege of playing first from a teeing ground. P. A player has addressed the ball when he has taken up his position and grounded his club, or if in a hazard, when he has taken up his position preparatory to striking the ball. Q. The reckoning of strokes is kept by the terms the odd, 2 more, 3 more, etc., and 1 of 3, 1 of 2, the like. The reckoning of holes is kept by the terms, so many holes up, or all even, and so many, to play. 2. Match begins by each side playing a ball from the first teeing ground. The player who shall play first on each side shall be named by his own side. The option of taking the honour at the first teeing ground shall be decided, if necessary, by lot. A ball played from in front of, or outside of, or more than 2 club lengths behind the marks indicating the teeing ground, or played by a player when his opponent should have had the honour, may be at once recalled by the opposite side, and may be re-teed without penalty. The side which wins a hole shall have the honour at the next teeing ground. If a hole has been halved, the side which had the honour at the previous teeing ground shall retain the honour. On beginning a new match, the winner of the long match in the previous round shall have the honour, or if the previous match was halved, the side which last won a hole shall have the honour. 3. If the ball fall or be knocked off the tee in addressing it, no penalty shall be incurred, and it may be replaced, and if struck when moving, no penalty shall be incurred. 4. In a threesome or foursome, the partners shall strike off alternately from the teeing grounds, and shall strike alternately during the play of the hole. If a player play when his partner should have done so, his side shall lose the hole. 5. When the balls are in play, the ball further from the hole which the players are approaching shall be played first, except as otherwise provided for in the rules. If a player play when his opponent should have done so, the opponent may at once recall the stroke. A ball so recalled shall be dropped, in the manner prescribed in Rule 15, as near as possible to the place where it lay, without penalty. 6. The ball must be fairly struck at, not pushed, scraped, nor spooned, under penalty of the loss of the hole. 7. A ball must be played wherever it lies, or the hole be given up, except as otherwise provided for in the rules. 8. Unless with the opponent's consent, a ball in play shall not be moved nor touched before the hole is played out, under penalty of 1 stroke, except as otherwise provided for in the rules. But the player may touch his ball with his club in the act of addressing it, provided he does not move it without penalty. If the player's ball move the opponent's ball through the green, the opponent, if he choose, may drop a ball, without penalty, as near as possible to the place where it lay, but this must be done before another stroke is played. 9. In playing through the green, any loose impediment, not being in or touching a hazard, which is within a club length of the ball may be removed. If the player's ball move after any such loose impediment has been touched by the player, his partner, or either of their caddies, the penalty shall be 1 stroke. If any loose impediment, not being on the putting green, which is more than a club length from the ball be removed, the penalty shall be the loss of the hole. 10. Any vessel, wheelbarrow, tool, roller, grass cutter, box, or similar obstruction may be removed. If a ball be moved in doing so, it may be replaced without penalty. A ball lying on or touching such obstruction, or on clothes, nets, or ground under a pair or covered up or open for the purpose of the upkeep of the links, may be lifted and dropped without penalty as near as possible to the place where it lay, but not nearer the hole. A ball lifted in a hazard, under such circumstances, shall be dropped in the hazard. A ball lying in the golf hole or flag hole, or in a hole made by the greenkeeper, may be lifted and dropped without penalty as near as possible to the place where it lay, but not nearer the hole. 11. Before striking at a ball in play, the player shall not move, bend, nor break anything fixed or growing near the ball, except in the act of placing his feet on the ground for the purpose of addressing the ball, in soiling his club to address the ball, and in his upward or downward swing, under penalty of the loss of the hole, except as otherwise provided for in the rules. 12. When a ball lies in, or touches a hazard, nothing shall be done to improve its lie. The club shall not touch the ground, nor shall anything be touched or moved before the player strikes at the ball, subject to the following exceptions. 1. The player may place his feet firmly on the ground for the purpose of addressing the ball. 2. In addressing the ball, or in the upward or downward swing, any grass, bent, whin, or other growing substance, or the side of a bunker, wall, paling, or other immovable obstacle, may be touched. 3. Steps or planks placed in a hazard by the Green Committee for access to or egress from such hazard may be removed, and if a ball be moved in so doing, it may be replaced without penalty. 4. Any loose impediments may be removed from the putting green. 5. The player shall be entitled to find his ball as provided for by Rule 31. The penalty for a breach of this rule shall be the loss of the hole. 13. A player or caddy shall not press down nor remove any irregularities of surface near a ball in play. Dung, worm casts, or molehills may be removed, but not pressed down, without penalty. The penalty for a breach of this rule shall be the loss of the hole. 14. 1. If a ball lie or be lost in water or in casual water in a hazard, a ball may be dropped in or as far behind the hazard as the player may please, under penalty of 1 stroke, but if it be possible from want of space in which to play, or from any other cause, to drop the ball behind the hazard, the player may drop a ball at the side of the hazard as near as possible to where the ball lay, but not nearer to the hole, under penalty of 1 stroke. 2. If a ball lie or be lost in casual water through the green, or if casual water through the green interferes with the player's stance, the player may drop a ball, without penalty, within 2 club lengths from the margin directly behind the place where the ball lay, or from the margin nearest to the place where the ball lay, but not nearer to the hole. If the ball when dropped roll into the water, or rest so that the water interferes with the player's stance, it may be re-dropped, without penalty, as near to the margin as the nature of the ground permits, but not nearer to the hole. 3. In dropping a ball behind the spot from which the ball was lifted, the player shall keep that spot, or, in the case of water, the spot at which the ball entered, in a line between himself and the hole. Wherever it is impossible to drop a ball as prescribed in sections 1 and 2, it shall be dropped as near as possible to the place where it lay, but not nearer to the hole. 4. If a ball lie in casual water on a putting green, a ball may be placed by hand behind the water without penalty. The penalty for a breach of this rule shall be the loss of the hole. 15. A ball shall be dropped in the following manner. The player himself shall drop it. He shall face the hole, stand erect, and drop the ball behind him from his head. If the ball when dropped touch the player, he shall incur no penalty, and if it roll into a hazard it may be re-dropped without penalty. The penalty for a breach of this rule shall be the loss of the hole. 16. When the balls lie within 6 inches of each other on the putting green, or within a club length of each other through the green, or in a hazard, the distance be measured from their nearest points. The ball nearer the hole may, at the option of either the player or the opponent, be lifted until the other is played, and shall then be replaced as near as possible to the place where it lay. If the ball further from the hole be moved in so doing, or in measuring the distance, it shall be replaced without penalty. If the lie of the lifted ball be altered by the player in playing, the ball may be placed in a lie as nearly as possible similar to that from which it was lifted, but not nearer the hole. 17. Any loose impediments may be removed from the putting green, irrespective of the position of the player's ball. The opponent's ball may not be moved except as provided for by the immediately preceding rule. If the player's ball move after any loose impediment lying within 6 inches of it has been touched by the player, his partner, or either of their caddies, the penalty shall be 1 stroke. 18. When the ball is on the putting green, the player or his caddy may remove, but not press down, sand, earth, dung, worm casts, molehills, snow, or ice lying around the hole or in the line of his putt. This shall be done by brushing lightly with the hand only across the putt and not along it. Dung may be removed by a club, but the club must not be laid with more than its own weight upon the ground. The line of the putt must not be touched, except with the club immediately in front of the ball, in the act of addressing it, or as above authorized. The penalty for a breach of this rule is the loss of the hole. 19. When the ball is on the putting green, no mark shall be placed, nor line drawn as a guide. The line of the putt may be pointed out by the player's caddy, his partner, or his partner's caddy, but the person doing so must not touch the ground. The player's caddy, his partner, or his partner's caddy, may stand at the hole, but no player nor caddy shall endeavour, by moving or otherwise, to influence the action of the wind upon the ball. The penalty for a breach of this rule is the loss of the hole. 20. When on the putting green, a player shall not play until his opponent's ball is at rest, under penalty of 1 stroke. 21. Either side is entitled to have the flag stick removed when approaching the hole, but if a player's ball strike the flag stick which has been so removed by himself, or his partner, or by either of their caddies, his side shall lose the hole. If the ball rest against the flag stick when in the hole, the player shall be entitled to remove the stick, and if the ball fall in, it shall be deemed as having been holed out at the last stroke. If the player's ball knock in the opponent's ball, the latter shall be deemed as having been holed out at the last stroke. If the player's ball move the opponent's ball, the opponent, if he choose, may replace it, but this must be done before another stroke is played. If the player's ball stop on the spot formerly occupied by the opponent's ball, and the opponent declare his intention to replace, the ball shall first play another stroke, after which the opponent shall replace and play his ball. If the opponent's ball lie on the edge of the hole, the player, after holing out, may knock it away, claiming the hole if holing at the like, and the half if holing at the odd, provided that the player's ball does not strike the opponent's ball and set it in motion. If after the player's ball is in the hole, the player neglect to knock away the opponent's ball, and it fall in also, the opponent shall be deemed to have holed out at his last stroke. 22. If a ball, in motion, be stopped or deflected by any agency outside the match, or by the fore-caddy, the ball must be played from where it lies, and the occurrence submitted to as a rub of the green. If a ball lodge in anything moving, a ball shall be dropped as near as possible to the place where the object was when the ball lodged in it, without penalty. If a ball at rest be displaced by any agency outside the match, excepting wind, the player shall drop a ball as near as possible to the place where it lay, without penalty. On the putting green the ball shall be replaced by hand, without penalty. 23. If the player's ball strike, or be moved by an opponent, or an opponent's caddy or clubs, the opponent shall lose the hole. 24. When a player has holed out, and his opponent has been left with the putt for the half, nothing that the player can do shall deprive him of the half which he has already gained. 25. If a player's ball strike, or be stopped by himself or his partner, or either of their caddies or clubs, his side shall lose the hole. 26. If the player, when not intending to make a stroke, or his partner, or either of their caddies, move his or their ball, or by touching anything cause it to move when it is in play, the penalty shall be 1 stroke. If a ball in play move, after the player has grounded his club in the act of addressing it, or, when in a hazard, if he has taken up his stand to play it, he shall be deemed to have caused it to move, and the movement shall be counted as 1 stroke. 27. Except from the tee, a player shall not play while his ball is moving, under penalty of the loss of the hole. If the ball only begin to move while the player is making his upward or downward swing, he shall incur no penalty for playing while it is moving, but is not exempted from the penalty stroke which he may have incurred under Rules 9, 17, or 26, and in a foursome a stroke lost under Rule 26 shall not, in these circumstances, be counted as the stroke of the player so as to render him liable for having played when his partner should have done so. 28. If the player when making a stroke strike the ball twice, the penalty shall be 1 stroke, and he shall incur no further penalty by reason of his having played while his ball was moving. 29. If a player play the opponent's ball, his side shall lose the hole, unless 1. The opponent then play the player's ball, whereby the penalty is cancelled, and the hole must be played out with the balls thus exchanged, or 2. The mistake occur through wrong information given by the opponent or his caddy, in which case there shall be no penalty, but the mistake, if discovered before the opponent has played, must be rectified by placing a ball as near as possible to the place where the opponent's ball lay. If a player play a stroke with the ball of a party not engaged in the match, and the mistake be discovered and intimated to his opponent before his opponent has played his next stroke, there shall be no penalty. But if the mistake be not discovered, and so intimated until after the opponent has played his next stroke, the player's side shall lose the hole. 30. If a ball be lost, except as otherwise provided for in the rules, the player's side shall lose the hole, but if both balls be lost, the hole shall be considered halved. 23. If a ball lie in fog, bent, winds, long grass, or the like, only so much thereof shall be touched as will enable the player to find his ball. But if a ball lie in sand, the sand shall not be touched. The penalty for a breach of this rule shall be the loss of the hole. 32. If a ball be played out of bounds, a ball shall be dropped at the spot from which the stroke was played, under penalty of loss of the distance. A ball played out of bounds need not be found. If it be doubtful whether a ball has been played out of bounds, another may be dropped and played, but if it be discovered that the first ball is not out of bounds, it shall continue in play without penalty. A player may stand out of bounds to play a ball lying within bounds. 33. A player shall not ask for advice from anyone except his own caddy, his partner, or his partner's caddy, nor shall he willingly be otherwise advised in any way whatever, under penalty of the loss of the hole. 34. If a ball splits into separate pieces, another ball may be put down where the largest portion lies, or if 2 pieces are apparently of equal size, may be put where either piece lies, at the option of the player. If a ball crack or become unfit for play, the player may change it on intimating to his opponent his intention to do so. Mud adhering to a ball shall not be considered as making it unfit for play. 35. When no penalty for the breach of a rule is stated, the penalty shall be the loss of the hole. 36. If a dispute arise on any point, the players have the right of determining the party or parties to whom it shall be referred, but should they not agree, either side may refer it to the Rules of Golf Committee, whose decision shall be final. If the point in dispute be not covered by the rules of golf, the arbiters must decide it by equity. 37. An umpire or referee, when appointed, shall take cognizance of any breach of rule that he may observe, whether he be appealed to on the point or not. Special rules for stroke competitions. 1. In stroke competitions, the competitor who holds a stipulated course in fewest strokes shall be the winner. 2. If the lowest scores be made by 2 or more competitors, the tie or ties shall be decided by another round to be played on the same day, but if the Green Committee determine that to be inexpedient or impossible, they shall then appoint the following or some subsequent day whereon the tie or ties shall be decided. 3. New holes shall be made for stroke competitions, and thereafter, before starting, no competitor shall play on any of the putting greens, nor shall he intentionally play at any of the holes, nor on to any of the putting greens, under penalty of disqualification. 4. The scores for each hole shall be kept by a special marker, or by the competitors noting each other's scores. The scores marked ought to be called out after each hole, and on completion of the round the cards shall be signed by the marker, under penalty of disqualification, and handed in. Competitors must satisfy themselves before the cards are handed in that their scores for each hole are correctly marked, as no alteration can be made on any card after it has been returned. If it be found that a score returned is below that actually played, the competitor shall be disqualified. For the addition of the scores marked, the secretary or his deputy shall be responsible. 5. If a competitor play from outside the limits of the teeing ground, the penalty shall be disqualification. 6. If a ball be lost, except as otherwise provided for in the rules of golf, the competitor shall return as near as possible to the spot from which the lost ball was struck, tee a ball, and lose a penalty stroke. The lost ball shall continue in play, if it be found before the player has struck another ball. The penalty for a breach of this rule shall be disqualification. 7. If a competitor's ball strike himself, his clubs or caddy, the penalty shall be 1 stroke. 8. If a competitor's ball strike another competitor, or his clubs or caddy, it is a rub of the green, and the ball shall be played from where it lies. If a competitor's ball which is at rest be moved by another competitor or his caddy, or his club or his ball, or by any outside agency excepting wind, it shall be replaced as near as possible to the place where it lay without penalty. 9. A competitor shall hole out with his own ball at every hole, under penalty of disqualification, but if it be discovered, before he is struck off from the next teeing ground, or if the mistake occur at the last hole, before he has handed in his card, that he has not holed out with his own ball, he shall be at liberty to return and hole out with his own ball, without penalty. 10. A ball may be lifted from any place under penalty of 2 strokes. The ball so lifted shall be teed if possible behind the place where it lay. If it be possible to tee the ball behind the place where it lay, it shall be teed as far as possible thereto, but not nearer the hole. The penalty for a breach of this rule shall be disqualification. 11. All balls shall be holed out under penalty of disqualification. When a competitor's ball is within 20 yards of the hole, the competitor shall not play until the flag has been removed, under penalty of 1 stroke. When both balls are on the putting green, if the player's ball strike the opponent's ball, the player shall lose a stroke. The ball near the hole shall, on request of the player, be either lifted or holed out at the option of the owner, under penalty of his disqualification. Through the green a competitor may have any other competitor's ball lifted, if he find that it interferes with his stroke. 12. A competitor, unless specially authorized by the Green Committee, shall not play with a professional, and he may not willingly receive advice from any one but his caddy, in any way whatever, under penalty of disqualification. A fore-caddy may be employed. 13. Competitors shall not discontinue play or delay to start on account of bad weather, nor any other reason whatever, except such as is satisfactory to the committee of the club in charge of the competition. The penalty for a breach of this rule is disqualification. 14. Where in the rules of golf the penalty for the breach of any rule is the loss of the hole, in stroke competitions the penalty shall be the loss of 2 strokes, except where otherwise provided for in these special rules. 15. Any dispute regarding the play shall be determined by the Rules of Golf Committee. 16. The rules of golf, so far as they are not at variance with these special rules, shall apply to stroke competitions. Rules for 3-ball matches. In matches in which 3 players play against each other, each playing his own ball, hereinafter referred to as a 3-ball match, or in which one player plays his own ball against the best ball of 2 players, hereinafter referred to as a best ball match, the rules of golf shall apply, subject to the following modifications. 1. Where, in a 3-ball match, at any teeing ground no player is entitled to claim the honour from both opponents, the same order of striking shall be followed as at the previous teeing ground. 2. Except as hereinafter provided, the side whose ball is furthest from the hole shall play first, but a ball lying nearer the hole and belonging to one of that side may, at their option, be played before the ball lying furthest away from the hole. If a player play when his opponent should have done so, he shall incur no penalty. 3. If a player consider that an opponent's ball on the putting green might interfere with his stroke, he may require the opponent either to lift or to hole out his ball at the opponent's discretion. 4. If an opponent consider that the ball of another opponent might be of assistance to the player, he may require that it be either lifted or hauled out at the other opponent's discretion. 5. If an opponent consider that his own ball might be of assistance to the player, he is entitled to lift it or haul it out at his discretion. 6. If an opponent consider that the player's partner's ball might be of assistance to the player, he may require that it be either lifted or hauled out at the player's partner's discretion. 7. In a 3-ball match, a ball on the putting green, which is moved by another ball, must be replaced as nearly as possible where it lay. 8. In a best ball match, if the player's ball move his partner's ball or an opponent's ball, the opponent shall in either case decide whether the moved ball shall be replaced or not. 9. If in a 3-ball match a player's ball strike or be moved by an opponent or an opponent's caddy or clubs, that opponent shall lose the hole to the player. As regards the other opponent, the occurrence is a rub of the green. 10. In a best ball match, if a player's ball strike or be moved by an opponent or an opponent's caddy or clubs, the opponent's side shall lose the hole. 11. In a best ball match, if a player's ball, the player being one of a side, strike or be stopped by himself or his partner or either of their caddies or clubs, the player only shall be disqualified for that hole. 12. In all other cases where a player would by the rules of golf incur the loss of the hole, he shall be disqualified for that hole, but the disqualification shall not apply to his partner. Etiquette of golf. 1. A single player has no standing and must always give way to a properly constituted match. 2. No player, caddy, or onlooker should move or talk during a stroke. 3. No player should play from the tee until the party in front have played their second strokes and are out of range, nor play up to the putting green till the party in front have holed out and moved away. 4. The player who has the honour from the tee should be allowed to play before his opponent tees his ball. 5. Players who have holed out should not try their putts over again when other players are following them. 6. Players looking for a lost ball must allow other matches coming up to pass them. 7. On request being made, a 3-ball match must allow a single, threesome, or foursome to pass. Any match playing a whole round may claim the right to pass a match playing a shorter round. 8. If a match fail to keep its place on the green, and lose in distance more than one clear hole on those in front, it may be passed, on request being made. 9. Turf cut or displaced by a stroke should be at once replaced. 10. A player should carefully fill up any holes made by himself in a bunker. 11. It is the duty of an umpire or referee to take cognizance of any breach of rule that he may observe, whether he be appealed to on this point or not. End of section 24, read by Inkell. End of The Complete Golfer by Harry Vardon.